Breaking news from BNN. The United States has ramped up its nuclear readiness, moving to a heightened state of alert. This critical shift comes after Russian President Putin bold claim that Russia has increased its stockpile of orosenic missiles and will continue deploying them in combat roles in an effort to deter further escalation. U.S. nuclear forces are now on high alert, showcasing a position of strength. In a tense development overseas, a bomb scare was reported near the U.S. Embassy in London. While the details remain unclear, an explosion was heard in the vicinity, adding to the already charged atmosphere. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, forces are now reportedly contending with North Korean troops who have been sighted fighting in the Kursk Oblast, according to recent reports.
Coming from inside of the United States of America, as we have been able to hear, the United States Armed Forces doctrine on nuclear deterrence has been modified recently to counter the Russian threat that has been conducted through the Oreshnik intermediate range ballistic missile launch from just last night. We have been able to hear additional news as well that the United States government believes that the Russian Federation only has a limited number of these intermediate range ballistic missiles and does believe that currently the Russian Federation does not possess the ability to start mass attacks inside of Eastern Europe with these forms of intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, inside the Russian Federation, we have been able to hear that Putin does claim that they have more weapons of the Oreshnik variety ready to launch at any given moment, and also they have made the claim that they will be firing more Oreshniks inside of combat service here in the immediate future. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the conflict has been escalating in other means and in other scales, as we have been able to hear, according to Ukrainian intelligence, the arrival of more North Korean soldiers inside the area of Kharkiv Oblast and also North Korean engineers inside the city of Mariupol. We're not exactly sure the reason for the North Korean engineers arriving in Mariupol, as the last time North Korea constructed anything was about 60 years ago, but nevertheless it does appear that North Korean engineers are currently in the area at this very moment. Meanwhile, inside of Kharkiv, the battles rage that have been continuing to rage across the entirety of the Eastern Front, as the Russian Federation tries to drive away through the main highway, the N15, and into the town of Kharkiv itself, today bombing the now empty thermal power plant that was in the western side of the small town that has been largely unoccupied for about 2 years, attempting to destroy what may become a major defensive structure in the future. Meanwhile, we've also been able to see some more video and picture evidence emerging from the Marino Storm Shadow missile attack, where we were able to see a Storm Shadow rocketing his way across the countryside, apparently completely undetected by Russian air defense at the time the video was made. We have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have been eyeballing the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System, to be able to try and counter the incoming Russian intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which apparently will be fired several more times into Ukraine, according to the Russian statements. We've also been able to hear a statement that the Verkhovna Rada session has been canceled today as well, due to direct threats and fears that the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada building, equivalent to the U.S. Congress building, will be attacked and destroyed by Russian conventional fire. We have loads of news to cover today, and moving on into our most important piece of news that we have coming from the United States, we were able to hear that the United States nuclear readiness is being heightened. According to a direct statement today by the United States Department of Defense, the increased heightenedness of nuclear deterrence strategy includes the B-61-13 gravity bombs delivered by aircraft, as well as the enhanced readiness of nuclear-armed and powered Ohio-class submarines, and several other kinds of strategic deterrence that the United States of America possesses at its disposal to be able to deal with any nuclear threat. It does appear that while in the foreground, many people are considering the nuclear actions, well, the possible nuclear actions with the launch of the intermediate-range ballistic missile, the Oreshnik, yesterday by the Russian Federation to largely be nothing more than a bit of a warning or more so of a scare tactic, it does appear that the United States is taking appropriate precautions in the meantime to be able to deal with the situation and to ensure that the Russian Federation understands the United States nuclear readiness as going to be at a heightened pace and also ready to match whatever the Russian Federation may be doing here in the near future. At the exact same time, we've also been able to hear that Russia only has a few of the Oreshnik missiles, according to the United States Department of Defense, and the United States does believe that the Russian Federation does not possess a large or a very well fleshed out ability to be able to use the Oreshnik intermediate range ballistic missiles. From what we understand, the Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missiles are a modification of the RS-26, which has been in service with the Soviet Union and then further on the modern-day Russian Federation for some while. We are anticipating that most Oreshnik missiles are most likely a slightly modernized version of the RS-26, and for this reason, the Russian Federation may not have any Oreshniks in incredibly large number, but they may actually have a decent amount of RS-26s at their disposal that simply have not been upgraded to the modern Oreshnik pattern. We have also been able to hear that at the exact same time in Moscow, the Russian Federation continues to claim that they have even more weapons like it. And we can also see this in a statement from Putin today, which we'll be playing right here.
Знаете, вчера проинформировал личный состав вооруженных сил граждан России, наших союзников во всем мире, а также тех, кто пытается шантажировать нас силой о российской новейшей ракетной системе.
But that's the end of the clip right there, nevertheless insisting that more nuclear weapons, such as these, or more so, more intermediate-range ballistic missiles that are nuclear capable, to make sure that we clarify that correctly, are available for use. And according to additional statements, we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is claiming that they will continue to fire Oreshnik missiles in combat for the foreseeable future, meaning that the Ukrainians will now have to contend with dealing with and shooting down all Oreshnik missiles that are fired in some sort of a combat capability sometime in the future. From what we understand, the Ukrainian armed forces does consider this to be a major strategic threat, and of course, if these were armed with conventional warheads, that may very well be the case. We have seen that the Ukrainians have requested that they may want a THAAD launcher or THAAD launchers to be able to protect their skies. However, there are major issues with this involved. One, the THAAD is the newest air defense system inside the United States of America. And for this reason, the THAAD is a matter of national security to protect the technological, I guess you could say, advancements or the proprietary technological abilities that the THAAD launcher and the THAAD missiles have. Currently, there are no THAAD launchers in the world that are outside of the U.S. Armed Forces' possession. Any THAAD launchers that are inside the state of Israel, or for that matter inside of East Asia, are all currently deployed and used by the United States Army. And the remaining 4 that are inside of the United States are all inside of Texas, once again under the command of the United States Army. For this reason, we highly expect that this request is pretty much falling on deaf ears. There is absolutely no way possible that the United States is going to completely forgo its proprietary knowledge, its proprietary technology, and also the billions of dollars that we spent and about a decade developing this air defense system to hand it over immediately to the Ukrainians and possibly put all of that investment at risk or completely wash it away somehow, some way. The Ukrainians, however, are not entirely out of luck if they were to be attacked with an intermediate-range ballistic missile. In the areas of Eastern Europe, and also around the world, there is a certain kind of an air defense system called the Aegis Ashore ballistic missile defense systems. These are a very interesting sort of a defense system, as they largely are operated by the United States Navy and have an exceptionally long range. Using the SM-3 surface-to-air missiles, these complexes have a range of nearly 950 to 1,000 miles, with these missiles being capable of intercepting intermediate range and even intercontinental ballistic missiles during their boost and terminal phases. We do not believe that the Aegis Ashore would be able to intercept a IRBM or an ICBM with its MIRV or MARV in any sort of a post-boost or mid-course phase, as the system may be traveling too quickly at that point. However, if we're being concerned about the area of Eastern Europe and the launches from the Russian Federation over the Atlantic and towards European countries or the United States, the Aegis Ashore systems actually provide a great deal of nuclear defense, at least in the areas of Eastern Europe, where these missiles would first initially be launched and would be in some form of a boost or a terminal phase. These systems also have a range of 950 miles, and based off of the location of the Aegis Ashore system inside of Romania, this system is able to quite literally cover the entirety of Ukraine with its firing arc, meaning that if an actual nuclear weapon was to be fired at Ukraine, we probably would see that the Aegis Ashore system inside of Romania would be deployed to be able to deal with the incoming threat to Ukraine and largely shoot down the system. We do believe that at that point, diplomatically, the West would consider using direct force of arms, such as the use of an Aegis Ashore in a defensive manner in the support of the state of Ukraine, considering that the Russians would at this point be using a nuclear weapon. And for this reason, we are also assuming that the Ukrainians would not need a THAAD. For this reason, because simply the matter of fact is there is already an air defense system that the United States possesses that will easily be able to cover the entirety of the airspace of Ukraine. And for that reason, requesting a THAAD is largely moot. Not only that, we would also have to completely throw away security interests as well to give them one. And on top of that, the amount of training time required for the Ukrainians to be able to operate and field one of these THAAD systems properly would be somewhere around a year, meaning that by the time the THAAD was actually used in Ukraine, it would be long past the threat that we're currently seeing right now. And for this reason, we do believe that the Ukrainians will not be getting a THAAD system from the United States of America anytime soon, and this is more so wishful thinking by the Ukrainians to believe that there is even a proper request to be able to get a THAAD. Nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into some more news that we've been able to hear, that while the Ukrainians do not have the THAAD and they have the Patriot, which is the next best thing, and of course, really the only air defense system that is as advanced and capable as it is in the world that is used by multiple countries, we have been able to hear that apparently the Verkhovna Rada session has been canceled today inside of Kyiv due to threats and fears that the Russian Federation is going to directly bomb the Verkhovna Rada building with some sort of a missile strike or a drone strike. We have been hearing this for the past day, and it does appear that considering that the Russian Federation has now attacked with an IRBM the city of Dnipro, it's not entirely impossible to say that the Russian Federation may attempt an attack on the Verkhovna Rada building to once again send a stronger message to Ukraine. And for this reason, the Verkhovna Rada session has been canceled, at least at the moment. It does also appear that the Ukrainians may have a decent reason to believe that the Verkhovna Rada building is going to be stricken, as we have been able to hear some concerning information today outside of London, as we have been able to hear that inside of the city of London, an explosion has occurred very close to the U.S. Embassy, somewhere on a street just nearby. According to information that we've gotten from the Metropolitan Police, they have found a suspicious package near the building, cordoned off the area, and then conducted a controlled explosion of the package to remove it from the nearby perimeter of the U.S. Embassy. From what we understand, the U.S. Embassy is largely a fairly protected compound, as we can see the U.S. Embassy in London right here. And to try and show y'all a better picture of it from a distance, and let me see if we can get a picture such as this, the embassy does have a larger security perimeter around it, but nevertheless, a possible bomb being somewhere in the area of 9 Elms Lane, and also apparently 9 Elm Street as well, is a bit of a concern. We do not know the exact location of the bomb at the moment or the suspicious package that was remotely detonated, but nevertheless, it was somewhere on 9 Elms Lane, just to the north of the U.S. Embassy of London, pretty much skirting along the River Thames. It may have been a little ways down, somewhere near the apartment blocks that are at New Union Square, or they may have even been further down towards this new construction that we're seeing here on the satellite imagery. Nevertheless, it was incredibly close to the U.S. Embassy from what we heard, and may have been some sort of a possible threat given by the Russian Federation that the United States and the United Kingdom may be under some form of threat, in at least a symbolic form. We are going to be waiting to see if we can get any additional information on this bombing or what was actually in the suspicious package, because at the moment it seems to be a very concerning incident, possibly relating to the United States Embassy and one of national security interest. But nevertheless, we do not know a large amount of details, at least publicly at this moment, that have been issued by the Metropolitan Police, and for this matter, we will just have to simply wait and figure out what actually happened at the U.S. Embassy sometime in the future. Nevertheless, that does not mean that things are not happening at this moment on the ground inside of Ukraine, as we have been able to hear of major developments that are still going on the ground. And to bring y'all back once again just one day ago to the massive Storm Shadow attack that happened at Merino, we were able to see that Storm Shadows were seen flying on their way into the region, which y'all can see right here. And check this out. And there it goes. And there goes a couple of others, actually. Those were the very missiles that would end up slamming down into the military complex at Merino and apparently wounding and killing a large amount of Russian general staff, and also grievously wounding several North Korean officers as well that were inside of the compound. From what we understand, the Ukrainians will most likely be using the Storm Shadow and ATACMS in the future to target more Russian locations, and we are also expecting as well that the Russian Federation will continue to escalate in response for every single time the Ukrainians use an ATACMS or a Storm Shadow. The reason why the Russians are going to be escalating in response response to every single time the Ukrainians are using the Storm Shadow or ATACMS is that the Storm Shadow is quite literally impervious to Russian air defense, considering that it is a low visibility missile and largely undetectable on Russian radar, and also the ATACMS missiles, while not being low visibility at all and they light up a radar like a Christmas tree, we have seen that the Russian air defense has a very difficult time trying to shoot those down. And so for this reason, every single time the Ukrainians use these weapon systems, it is a guaranteed hit on whatever that Russian strategic target they were trying to destroy is. And for this reason, the Russian Federation panics and may even weep behind the scenes for each and every single one of these attacks that are conducted. Once again, showing that the Russian Federation's armed forces are a lot weaker than one would actually think, at least according to what we always saw on paper. Moving on from that and into the Belgorod region, though, and actually into Kharkiv, we were able to hear some concerning news that North Korean troops have been spotted inside of Ukraine's eastern Kharkiv region, according to a spokesperson for the Ukrainian military. And this is the first ever time that we've actually seen North Korean troops outside of the Russian Federation and the Kursk Oblast. This is the first time that they've ever actually been seen inside of Ukraine and inside of active frontline fighting anywhere within the actual contested areas of the front line in Ukraine. We are not really sure what this is showing. This may be showing that the Russian Federation is starting to grip with manpower woes quite literally anywhere and everywhere across the front line, or it may show that the Russian Federation has requested the North Koreans change their agreement to only use the North Koreans inside of the Russian Federation for security purposes, and now they're being allowed to be used inside of Ukraine, but in exchange, the North Koreans get more valuable materials such as oil, food, or maybe even further weaponry like air defense systems to be able to continue to work towards their own national interests. This doesn't mean that this is the only place that we've heard, according to Ukrainian intelligence, that the North Koreans have been spotted, as we've also been able to hear that apparently North Korean engineers are also being spotted inside of the area of Mariupol. We're not exactly sure what is going on with the North Koreans inside of Mariupol. They may be trying to get an idea of how to conduct larger civil engineering constructions, considering that due to the massive social restructuring that happened in 1990 inside of North Korea during the March of Suffering, which is their Great Famine, where Kim Il-sung, Kim Il-sung died, Kim Jong-il took over, and Kim Jong-il brought forward the Songun social system, which meant that the North Korean military was largely responsible for moving the nation forward. This may be a continuation of that under Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un may be allowing certain contingents of the North Korean technical advisors and engineering staff to be able to travel to Mariupol to try and get some ideas on how to conduct modern levels of civil engineering and also building development. That may be the case because we really don't know any other good reason as to why the North Korean engineers and technical advisors would be inside of Mariupol, but nevertheless, they are there at the moment. We were also able to see a very interesting instance in the southern front line of Pokrovsk, where the Russians had bombed the Kurakove thermal power plant, which had been out of use for some time considering its proximity to the front line, but it does appear that the Russians are already dropping some incredibly large ordnance onto the facility, trying to make sure that it completely destroys its fighting abilities or defensive abilities in the future if the Battle of Kurakove was to ever actually coalesce into a major street-to-street battle. We can see that the bomb actually hit one of the main stacks of the thermal power plant, and it appears that the stack has completely collapsed, and that's what most of the dust and debris is coming from. We're not exactly sure why they struck one of the smokestacks or one of the, I guess you could say, dischargers or I guess you could say a thermal vent of the thermal power plant. We're not entirely sure why they did that. Maybe they were trying to destroy some sort of a defensive post in their minds or something along those lines, but we really do not understand why exactly they took that action. Nevertheless, that is largely all of the news that we have today. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. And if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to consider subscribing. We really love to see when people subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy. YouTube doesn't really care, but we care a great deal. And so if you do subscribe, thank you very much.
Stay tuned to BNN for more updates as these dramatic stories continue to unfold.